10 random magic cards, rated, reviewed, given a number, episode number 1. Let's see what the first card in the history of the series is, everybody. Exciting stuff. It's Thieving Magpie. Let's look at the Urza's Destiny one. It's my favorite one. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue for a 1/3 Boyd with flying, and it deals damage to one of your opponents. You get to draw yourself a card. Notice that it's not combat damage specifically. It's any damage that this thing deals, so you can put some sort of tap to deal a damage effect. There's a few of those in Magic on this, and suddenly you draw in a bunch of cards, and if you can untap it, tap it again, you draw in some cards. Either way, this is supposed to be a take on Ophidian, another old school card that a lot of whippersnappers watching this will probably not have ever encountered in their lives. But this was a slightly, in some ways, better take on a card that was already a pretty cool creature in control. But I would say history has definitely left the Magpie by the wayside at this point. And although I'm mostly rating, reviewing, and assigning numbers for these cards in the Commander environment, casual Commander specifically, I really can't imagine that too many people are going to be playing this card nowadays. So maybe if you're building your old school cube, it's like a 7 or something, but in most cases, this is going to be like a 3. Sorry, buddy. Still love you. Got a lot of good memories with the Magpie. But up next is Feral Shadow. Speaking of memories, geez, Feral Shadow is 2 and a black for a 2/1 flyer. Summon creature. Apparently, it's actually Summon Night Stalker. I don't think I ever knew that, because the last time I looked at this card was when I opened a pack of Portal. Or apparently the last time I looked at this card is when I opened a pack of Classic 6. Oh, yeah, I remember this art, too. Okay, yeah. This card's terrible, though, right? 3 mana for a 2/1 flyer. 3 mana for an Inkling token, basically. That's a very bad Magic card, unless you just really are working on the Night Stalker deck. I don't think you have too many options, unless you just Changelings plus this guy, maybe is what you're going for. I'm going to give it a 1.7. It is a cool card, though. This Portal art is amazing, isn't it? Look, that's so cool. Rando card number 3, we're going to look at Venerated Rod Priest. I don't like you. This is a single green mana for a 1/2 Phyrexian Druid with Toxic 1. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell, target opponent gets themselves a poison counter. This is a jerk card right here. You just want to be a jerk, you play this thing. It's fun, though, I guess. I do like, in Commander at least, that its target opponent gets a poison counter, so it's a lot harder to actually exploit this thing in Commander. But in Standard, I got to give this thing like a 6.7. It's a good Magic card. It actually can just steal games out of nowhere, steal entire tournaments out of nowhere. We've seen it happen, but I guess if you're trying to make the poison deck work in Commander, you almost basically have to play this guy too. So not a bad Magic card, sitting around 250 right now. Not bad. What about this? Oh, it's a promo for 525. Get out of here. Just get the one for like 250 and have a good life. I feel it's a good card to have in like any collection. So I will just kind of give this one a round score, considering it's decent Standard, but probably not great outside of that format. I just give this a round score of like 6.2. Up next, though, is, let's see what it's Lavaborn Muse. Cool card, man. Let's look at the Legions one. I like an old school border. 4 mana, 3 and a red for a 3/3 Spirit. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if that player has 2 or fewer cards in hand, Lavaborn Muse deals 3 damage to him or her. I was thinking Jason Muse. Jason Muse deals 3 damage to him or her. So cool little thing that you would normally see in black. It's like a rack effect, right? But red gets it, and that's kind of unique right there. The card hasn't been printed like that many times, but that said, you can still get it for like 32 cents because, it's not the most amazing card in the world, but still, I do like this kind of effect right here. I especially like it with discard effects. If you're building black-red, discard somehow. Maybe this again is a cool like added rack effect, because you can only play one copy of the rack or Megrim or whatever like thing that hates on them for discarding. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think I do like this card a good bit, but I'm not going to score it more than like just about the same as Venerated Rod Priest, but probably slightly lower. I'll give it a 5.8. Another cool cube card, I gotta say. But we'll move on here to, what is this, the 4th card or something? Yeah, Warp World. Oh, wow. It's Reputation precedes you, buddy. This is 8 mana, a 5, 3 red for a sorcery with so much text. Each player shuffles all permanents he or she owns into their library, then reveals that many cards from the top of their library. Each player puts all artifact, creature, and land cards revealed this way onto the B field, then does the same for enchantment cards, then puts all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield on the bottom of his or her library. So you see what's happening here is that you have a bunch of junky permanents in play, right? And you're actually, in the meantime, you're also getting your opponent's good stuff. and putting stuff into play they didn't necessarily base their entire plan around. You know what I mean? But this does cost 8 mana. That said, it does some pretty funky stuff when you actually cast it, and it's fun to build like commander decks sort of around it. You know, there's decent commanders that can take advantage of a card like this, but I don't feel like you hear it talked about as much as you used to, you know, as evidenced by the fact that it's really, really cheap. You can get any given copy of Warp World for under $1, and I feel like this card used to just have a lot more sort of buzz behind it, right? So bring back Buzz World, or bring back Buzz World? What am I talking about? Bring back Warp World. Oh man, my brain. But anyway, I guess I'll have to give this card, just because it's a huge effect, you know, I'm going to go ahead and give it like a 4.879, 4.879, something like that. Because I really don't want to give it as much as a 5. It's like the most narrow effect, and it costs like way too much mana, but it's still an incredibly fun card, so I got to give it some props. It's also got a fun history, but we'll move on to the next rando card. It's Mighty Leap. It's pretty not great magic card. Little combat trick for limited here. 2 mana, 1 and a white for an instant. A creature you control, doesn't even have to be a guy you control. You can target whatever. A target creature gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. So again, fun limited combat tricks. I'm mostly going to give those a 2. That was an easy one. Sure. Will you ever play this in any commander deck ever? Right? So really more like a 1.6. How bad is this card? It's pretty bad. I guess the best thing about it is the fact that it's the elephant is getting the wings. That's hilarious. Moving on to Reflecting Pool, another card I got some memories with. My buddy used to play a deck called Toast. Does anybody remember Toast? Kind of a 5-color Cruel Ultimatum control deck. And Reflecting Pool was a very, very important land in that deck. And it's been an important land for a long time. As a matter of fact, can we view all prints for a second? Can we view all prints and go to the OG? Can we look at the Tempest? Yeah, it's the boy right there. You can still get this for less than $20. That ain't bad at all, man. Less than $20 for a Tempest Reflecting Pool. I'd pay that right now. I might, actually. But anyway, Reflecting Pool is a sweet little card, man. Just a land that taps to add to your mana pool 1 mana of any land, of any type that any land you control can produce. If you can already produce a color, Reflecting Pool can produce that color as well. Really sweet card. Again, been a pretty important part of plenty of competitive decks and plenty of commander decks over time, too. And it seems like if you don't want to necessarily get the Tempest one, you can actually get plenty of other ones for a relatively decent price. So, you know, get a Reflecting Pool and thank me later. It's a good card. Back when the lands used to have this border, right, with like the yellow text box. I love this look, but honestly, Reflecting Pool is probably the best card we've looked at so far. Just all together, man, no matter what format you're playing. So it's also, I mean, it benefits from being like a sweet land. Those are typically really good. So I'm going to give Reflecting Pool like a solid 7.85, like in that territory. Reflecting Pool is a good card. Up next is Double Cross. This is an unglued card. I think I'm going to throw it out. Can I throw out can that be a rule for this series? I hadn't really thought about this before, but I think I should probably throw out unglued cards. Or just uncards, period. But what does this even do? 5 mana, 3 and 2 black, sorcery. Choose another player, look at that player's hand, and choose one of those cards other than a basic land. He or she discards that card. At the beginning of the next game with that player, look at that player's hand and choose one of the cards other than a basic land. He or she discards that card. So, funny, you get 2 cards over the course of 2 games, and one of them you get at the beginning of the next game without having to pay any mana. It's very cute. I like it, but I'm not going to score it. Grasp of Fate, 3 mana. This is from the Doctor Who set. It's also from Commander 2015. This is 3 mana, 1 and 2 white for an enchantment. When it ETBs, for each opponent, exile up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls until Grasp of Fate leaves the battlefield. What do you give an Oblivion Ring? But I guess in Commander this gets 3 things at the very least, right? Maybe you're playing with 8 people, but this gets at least 3 things. And that seems great. I would say, why would you not play this instead of like Oblivion Ring or something? Does this have even earlier prints than the Commander print? What is, oh, okay. Commander 2015. All right. That is definitely the youngest one. Wait, the oldest one. Sorry. It's the oldest one. This card is good in Commander. So, like, what does a really good removal piece in Commander get? 6.5? 6.5. It sounds okay. I don't know. It's probably closer to a 6.25, right? Let's leave it there. 6.25. For a Deece Oblivion Ring. Oh, Mirror Entity. My little buddy. Oh, my goodness. This guy originally printed in, I think, Lore Lorwyn block at the very least. It's 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 1/1 shapeshifter with changeling. That means it's every creature type. You can pay X, and until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX and gain all creature types. So that is pretty amazing, isn't it? We used to bust games wide open with Mirror Entity. There were even some like blue, white, black. Usually Fairies decks back in the day were blue, black. But there were some Esper Fairies decks that would play Mirror Entity to just kind of like get through, especially in the hilarious, ironically enough, the Mirror match. You could get this guy down and just go through your opponent's fairies because yours are huge now. Every turn they're as big as you want them to be. This guy has a pretty good threat of activation when they go to swing into. So just a really sweet guy, and probably should see play in way, way, way more commander decks. Like even commander decks that aren't like creature type matters, like your elves deck or your humans deck or whatever. Like even if your creature types matter not at all in your commander deck, this does say that you can pump all of your creatures X, right? They have base power 7 until end of turn or whatever. It's an amazing mana sink late in the game if you have a lot of creatures in your deck. So really, really cool card considered for tokens decks and stuff like that. And of course, your, typal decks or whatever the kids are saying now. So cool card, man. And I'm probably biased here a little bit, but I'm going to give Mirror Entity like a 7. And I know that's like really, really high, but based on what I've given other stuff right now. I also don't care. This is, like I said, this is my buddy. I like this guy. But we'll move on to Crunch Wrangler. The Crunch! This is 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 2/1 human warrior with the tramps. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, Crunch gets a +1/+1 counter. It's if you can play like a 4 power guy on turn 3, a little 3/2 trample, play a 4 power guy the next turn, a little 4/3 trample, it's not bad. If you have a way of like putting a bunch of 4 power dudes into play over the course of like the same turn, obviously it gets huge, but that just means that he's probably fun in like certain commander decks, which is probably what I'm going to say about like a lot of these cards. Most cards have narrow applications in a commander deck or two, but I actually think this has more than narrow applications in more than 1 or 2 commander decks, Like first of all, it works like kind of well in +1/+1 counter decks, especially if you have enough guys with good base power and toughness. We've seen a trick recently with a card from like OTJ. I guess I'll try and put it on screen if I remember. It's this guy, it's like Outland something. But yeah, he's a 4 power guy, and whenever another 4 power guy comes into play, you get to draw a card. And he works pretty well with a couple of different cards that just let you copy him over and over. And the more copies of him you have in play, the more cards you draw every time his ability triggers. And it's just ridiculous, right? So this guy works pretty good with, those kind of strategies where you're just getting token copies of large dudes multiple times in a turn. He just gets huge. So I don't know. I wouldn't count this dude out like entirely. He's got baked in trample. Let's kind of go a little bit. So I don't know. Narrow as he is, I'm still going to give him like a 4. Could be worse. Let's move on to Whirling Dervish. Yes, let's view all prints. Let's view all prints, baby, and go to Legends. Why not? I was thinking about picking Chronicles, but Legends is where it's at, man. You can actually get this for $12 from Legends and like a quarter everywhere else. So that should tell you something. But we used to love Dervish back in the day, man. 2 green mana for a 1/1 Dervish. It's actually a human monk. Protection from black. Gets +1/+1 counters at the end of each turn in which it does damage to opponents. So what that's been errated to is at the beginning of each end step, if Whirling Dervish dealt damage to an opponent this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So this works pretty well with, Timmy, or not Timmy, like Tim effects. Anything like an aura that you can put on this guy that lets him tap to deal a damage to something. Then suddenly he gets really, really big as the turns go on, which is pretty cool. It's also able to proc at the end of your opponent's turns, which is pretty nice. Protection from black is sweet. It was especially sweet back in the day. That was kind of the whole deal with this card, is that your opponent can't terror it away, So cool card. And again, lots and lots of history with this thing. But it's really kind of not a great looking Magic card in the context of the current year, 2020X, as you watch this video. So I'm just going to give Whirling Dervish like a 5, and it's probably not even that much, but I love it. I love this Magic card. We'll move on to Phyrexian Reclamation, another Magic card I love, man. Good luck here as far as like card selection in the first video ever. Phyrexian Reclamation is a single black mana for an enchantment. You can pay 1 and a black and also 2 life to return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand. This is actually in several Aristocrat commander decks that I have built right now. It's in both Judith and Elisil Core. Like, I don't actually have that many commander decks, to be honest, but those are two of my favorites. This card is in both of them. It's also in Dina, Soul Steeper, for what it's worth. So I actually have this card in 3 different commander decks right now. And almost any commander deck with black in it, I feel like should play this card because like you're playing multiple ways of letting yourself like sack creatures a lot of the time. You can do like Fleshbag Marauder loops and stuff with this so long as you have the life. There's plenty of tricks with this, but especially in like anything sacrifice or aristocrat space, whatever you want to call it, right? This card is just an absolute house, dude. Like, you know, you don't have to play things like, I mean, you can still play like Victimize or whatever and other reanimation cards. But this is just, once you get the engine down, you can just like sacrifice a guy, pay the life, you know, pay the mana, play him again, sacrifice a guy. You don't have to rely on like reassembling skeleton for those tricks. So might be a little bit narrow, but it doesn't have to be, you know, relegated to just aristocrats decks. This is just a straight up powerful effect for black decks and commander, period. So I'm going to give this card like a 7.2, man. And I think that some of that is biased, but it's also just objectively a really good Magic card. So that, I believe, is 10 cards. Everybody. The last card of the first video was probably the best card in the video, to be honest. But yeah, good first video. Subscribe to the channel if you want more of these. I'm going to try to do them every single day. Bye.